Welcome everyone to another interesting discussion. This one has a lot of amazing information, and my guest is Cynthia Sue Larson, who's a best-selling author of several books, including Quantum Jumps, Reality Shifts, and High Energy Money. Cynthia has a degree in physics from UC Berkeley, an MBA degree, a Doctor of Divinity, and a second degree black belt in, I hope I say it, Kuksun Wan. Cynthia is founder of Reality Shifters, president of the International Mandela Effect Conference, managing director of Foundations of Mind, and creator and host of Living the Quantum Dream. She's been featured in numerous shows, including Gaia, the History Channel, Coast to Coast AM, One World with Deepak Chopra, and BBC. And she reminds us to ask in every situation, how good can it get? She has her website is realityshifters.com, and she has a e-zine that you can sign up for there. So in today's interview, she's bringing research she's done deeply into two different subjects and bringing them together, and it's really interesting. So one is about the Hopi, the Native American Hopi tribe that lives in northeastern Arizona, and their cosmological point, their cosmology, you know, their foresight, their wisdom, their intuition. I mean, it really relates to a lot of the new physics, and also her deep research into artificial intelligence. And she's wedding them together. And maybe there'll be a little Mandela effect in there, we don't know. And it's all about the question that we know, let me get this out here, but that humanity's at a real point in the road. And we either can choose to go with nature, you know, like the philosophers of nature, like all of our ancestors had, or we can go with the technological point of view, which we're really being pushed along the road towards. And so the Hopi had a many world history, cosmology, and they found when you took that path, it wasn't really good. So welcome, Cynthia.
Well, thank you, Carol. So glad to be
happy to have you here. I remember hearing you at the West Coast Conference on your AI talk. It was so good. So anyhow, here we go. And you maybe want to introduce the whole, the Hopi, how amazing they are.
Oh, they are so amazing. Yes. So I first started studying them a number of years ago when I found out that they had this word Tunatia and Tunajava, which are basically this concept of comes true, being hoped for, and the things we think of and wish for can actually be manifest in our daily lives. And so I thought I had a slide of this, and I'm trying to find it now, and I don't know. You know, when I do a power, oh wait, there it is.
Perfect.
Let's see if I can get this thing to.
We're in luck.
Let's see if I can figure this out. Hold on. So if I can open the image, and then, well, I'll talk about it when I'm trying to figure this out. Oh, it's doing some other application. So sorry, you know, when I've got a PowerPoint, then it's all the slides are set. This is a whole different thing. I was just trying to pull some images. So now it's loading a program, which I don't want it to do. So
So just go ahead with that.
I'll talk while it's doing that. Yeah, so basically the Hopi Prophecy Rock is this incredible, very ancient stone carving, and it's a set of petroglyphs. If you ever get a chance to read a book called The Rocks Begin to Speak, I highly recommend it because it shows a lot of these kinds of images and the significance of them. Sometimes people think these rock carvings are very primitive, but actually there's a symbology to them. And
Who wrote that?
I can't remember the name of the author.
Oh, okay, but I'll find a link for your thing.
And it's out of print too. So it's an out of print, excellent book. It's just wonderful. But it is The Rocks Begin to Speak is the name of it.
Okay.
So it's pretty easy to find that way.
Probably for $200 now, but they go out of print, right? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So, but this book is marvelous because it does indicate in sort of this way to look at the various images that you might see on the rocks and feel like you're getting a taste of how it is to do some of this interpretation. and to do some of this, being able to read the meaning of these rocks. And so it's quite extraordinary that way. And I've, let's see if I can get it to load now. See if I can just open it with, I thought this would all be so simple, but let's see. Hopefully, yes. And then, oh no, it's doing the same thing again. Oh, bother. Okay, well, I'll just continue on. I thought this, I don't know what's going on, but it keeps wanting to load Paint Shop.
So that's how it is on these.
Yeah, I know.
On this Zoom. It always is going to be so simple, and it never is.
I can see it, but I can't get it. I keep trying to save it as something.
But only you can see it. Okay.
I know. Yeah, that's what we've got right now. Let me try one more time while I'm still talking. I'm trying to, and I'm multitasking, see. So the image I'm looking at, I'll describe it as I'm just trying to save it so in a form I can show you. It's basically got these two paths on the rock. So it's carved in stone, mind you. There's a creator figure down in the lower left. And this figure is clearly giving some advice to mankind and explaining that we can basically take two paths. Now, this is all done in basically, as you know, it's, let me just see if I'm doing this correctly. I'm doing my multitasking. I can't, it looks like I'm doing this right, so I don't know why it's acting so weird. Okay, but anyway, the top line fizzles out and it shows a lot of human beings kind of, they look a little robotic to me, just my own take on it. They look sort of, they look like something that you might think when you see them, well, gosh, that's just, you know, kind of like they all look identical, like they're not trying to be. Oh, maybe I've got this now. Okay, let's see if we can do this. Okay, thank you for your patience. Let me see if I can go to share screen. And I'm going to see. Okay, here we are.
It was worth it.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so this is interesting.
Oh, I see what you mean about the robotic. Yeah.
Yeah, to me it looks that way. So I you know, just from interpreting things and the rocks begin to speak and learning what these symbols tend to mean. So basically, if I'm going to skip all the fine detail of this, it's worth looking at. It's in the book, The Rocks Begin to Speak, and it's on websites. But basically, and this is my rendition of the image. I've taken, you know, I've sort of sketched out the lines that because it's not the actual photograph of the rock. This is to show the detail. And so the two paths, and that's what the creator is telling mankind. And then there's a timeline kind of showing on the bottom. This is where it gets interesting. Apparently, mankind has faced this decision several times. It's not the first time. Like right now, we might think, good heavens, this is like the apocalypse happening with everything, with global warming. It doesn't matter where you stand politically or anything.
Yeah, but I mean, sort of the whole Atlantis story is sort of about that.
Right, exactly.
Technology, right?
Exactly. And if you look at Atlantis, you look at some of the Hopi mythology, you even look at the Bible stories and see Moses and the flood. And you'll start noticing that mankind goes through this sort of a pattern and sort of gets so full of himself, and humans think, oh, pat, 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 we've got it all figured out. And our technology of this time is just the best. And then and that's kind of that top line. It's sort of feeling like we are doing it exactly like this.
And then the Tower of Babel happens.
Yeah, you can fill it in. To me, that top line looks like it goes into a cloud and fizzles out, which is extremely meaningful right now for those of us looking at technology, looking at things like that and noticing, you know, is this cloud technology going to last forever? Where does it take us? The bottom line is showing mankind in relationship, keeping the kopavi, the chakra on the top of the head, open, and keeping the heart chakra open so that there can be this relationship with each other, with our animals, with our plants, with human beings, with the earth, with the stars, in relationship, with reverence, with meaning.
I found it interesting when you talked about the keeping the door on the top of the head open.
Yes, I love it.
That's what you just said, right? Yeah.
Yes, it's the kopavi. They call it kopavi. We call it crown chakra, whatever. Basically, it's just stay open to your dreams, your daydreams. Stay open to intuition, inspiration, to a direct knowingness, to the information that's there. Because so often we just go into autopilot, and then we had a little small still voice saying something and we ignored it, and then we feel terrible later. So this is the advice: stay open to it. Listen for that small, still voice of love and kindness and inspiration that's always there. And if we know that it's there, then we know the ideas are already there with us and that we're not alone. I think this fizzling out thing has a lot to do with assuming that whatever the technologies may be, and we can poo-poo the ones of the past, but why do that? I mean, it seems like technology is technology. And if you think you've got it all figured out, maybe don't be quite so prideful, don't be quite so, that pride is the opposite of humility. And I think we need humility to stay in reverence. And reverence is the key to relationship and respect. So
I love the idea of how you say the cloud with our cloud computing, and how it fizzles out, and there's the guy with his little corn, right? Like,
yeah, right. It's kind of like he's trying to hold on to something and it's just poof, vanishing. And some of us can see already, like the writing seems to be on the wall that maybe, like I think we're pre-recording. This is not live streaming, but today for hours and hours, there's been a huge outage on social media, Facebook, Instagram. These things are not permanent, but we tend to think they are. We tend to think that we'll always have all of our tools, or electricity, or internet. What if we don't? What if something happens? I'm not calling or asking for it, but I'm just saying it's so much better that if we have a good relationship with the plants in our garden and growing things, and relationships with everyone, with our neighbors, with our family, that we'll be in a stronger place together.
And I've been teaching in school, like in high school, I'd say at least half, maybe 3/4 of the kids can no longer tell time on an analog clock. They all can only tell digital. So you'll have like a senior asking you what time it is on the wall. I mean, that's such a simple little thing that we're losing,
That's so basic and so important.
Yeah.
And it's that's amazing. Never mind like a sundial or something like that. Right? Yeah, so let's see if I can figure out how to share the screen. Okay, so if I want to, okay, I'm going to share something else. Try to figure out how to do this. I'll do one image at a time, it looks like. Interesting. Okay. Well, this is something, I want to bring up this other slide because this, to me, embodies and kind of shows what this other way of thinking is that we might recognize. Because we look to a lot of technology and there's sort of a technocentrism across the world. It's not even one economy, it's not one nation, it's across the planet, that our technology seems to be the golden calf of our age, the thing that everyone respects, kind of like that's where the money is, that's where the profit is, that's where people, it used to just be banking. I don't even think it's banking anymore. Now it's technocracy. So where did this all start? Well, you could give some credit to transhumanism because this is the idea back in the 1950s. Julian Huxley said the human species can, if it wishes, transcend itself. We need a name for this new belief. Perhaps transhumanism will serve us. Man remaining man, but transcending himself by realizing new possibilities. And then there's a little excerpt here with this sort of modernistic illustration by 2016. Man's intelligence and intellect will be able to be increased by drugs and by linking human brains directly to computers.
Wow.
As if this is somewhat, and I know it's happening already.
Yeah.
I think just the other year, there was this monkey with electrodes hooked up to its brain and it's playing some computer game. Right. And I think, again, this is kind of, I think originally this was maybe a good idea. I think people were thinking like, where can humanity go next? And
right.
I guess they hadn't seen the Hopi Prophecy Rock, or they would have had like, wait a minute.
Second thoughts here.
Yeah, so they're actually thinking we can transcend ourselves. We can, this idea
you cut off a bit.
Are the next big thing, and we can go there.
Cynthia, you're not coming across.
Somehow, so many windows.
Cynthia, we're not hearing you. You're not.
Okay, I'm back.
We can't.
I'm back.
Yeah.
Okay.
The last couple minutes, I couldn't hear. Now you're talking, we don't hear you.
Okay, well, I've
Okay,
got,
now you're back.
yeah, I closed everything. Well, we don't need all that. I think those are the main slides I wanted to show anyway.
And they were perfect, and we just missed like a minute of you. Okay,
Okay, no big deal. So let's skip the rest of it. There's just more slides.
okay,
But we can talk about these ideas anyway, because I think that these two show what's that top line look like these days? What is going on? And if we think in terms of technocracy, transhumanism, this idea that the technology will save all of us somehow, and it doesn't matter what the problem of the day might be. It could be some biological problem, like like we're facing, could be environmental problems. I'm not going to name them, but if you start looking for technological solutions and start thinking artificial intelligence can solve it, computers can solve it, quantum computing can solve it, et cetera, et cetera. I think those are meant to be tools for us to work with, but that should never be what's in charge. Never.
right.
Never what's in charge. That's the big takeaway here.
So with the Hopis, can you go through those worlds they had and then how they survived? Because aren't they the longest surviving tribe in America?
Oh, I don't know if that's true, but I know, I'm not going to single out any one of the original peoples, the indigenous First Nations people.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Because truthfully, I've attended gatherings with people from Australia, from Canada, from the North America, from all around the world. I've with Mongolian shaman, each of these representatives of thousands of years of wisdom from their original, usually passed down through word of mouth. So this wisdom keeping tradition is usually an oral tradition. Sometimes there would be stone carvings, often not books, but that's okay, because if you can remember your stories, like the Aborigines in Australia remember the dream time. The Hopi, in their example, they do have some of these stone carvings. They also have stories, and they will tell us that we have gone through the ending of the world many times. So, and I don't have all of the names of these right in front of me, but so I'm like, whoo, what are they? But I do know that each time the world seemed like it was coming to an end, there would be indicators. And just like the Australians see a dream time and they see that we don't create the world. Humans think we do, but really all of the creations that we're coming up with have been foreseen. And the Hopi say the same thing, and so do the Navajo. Each of these have their own way of confirming and corroborating with this. The Blackfoot Indian tribes of Canada, Leroy Little Bear was the one who started the Language of Spirit conferences with physicist David Bohm. And in these conferences, we would come together. I was lucky enough to be not part of the original meeting, but some of the subsequent ones. And these wisdom traditions are profound because they share with us the concept that, that the ideas are already there, which starts sounding like this holographic interpretation of quantum physics.
Right.
Like everything's there. Or maybe, you might say, well, it sounds like a multiverse. Yes, it does. So if you know it, all the answers are there, also the so-called problems are there, and these crisis times are there. Yet we have free will. What's going on here? Well, these are the perennial questions. So in these gatherings of physicists, indigenous wisdom keepers, and linguists, that was a real key there. Because Dan Moonhawk Alfred was the first linguist that attended this conference held in Canada with David Bohm and Leroy Little Bear. Leroy Little Bear, he is a Blackfoot Indian, but he graduated from Harvard. So there's the wisdom and the intelligence in that room is profound, and the humor.
Wow. Yeah.
And I was fortunate enough to get to know both Dan Moonhawk Alfred and of course Leroy Little Bear is still with us, I hope. And then lots of other indigenous wisdom keepers and people from many tribes and indigenous cultures. So back to the Hopi, yes, they do talk about these pivotal epochs of time, which is quite meaningful as well. And that's not, I don't think it's unique to the Hopi. I think many of these traditions.
I just found it interesting how they just went under with the ant people each time and then reemerged. Yeah.
And so the ants are very special, whether you think of that just as pure people, like the ant people being ants. one of the times I was going to attend a conference, the Language of Spirit conference, and I was going to New Mexico where they were being held near Albuquerque. I was asked a simple question once I'd arrived. I'm there with a couple of other just typical, one was scholars, one was a linguist, and the other was sort of a, well, it's hard to pin down what she does. Oh, lots of things. Talks about, anyway, but the question asked to us was, how do you think we were able to tell when we're moving our group of people, the Navajo this was, when the Navajo would be moving, and we have old people, women, children, and we have lots of our possessions. We're going to be crossing a vast expanse of space. How do we know when the weather is good for us? How do the ants show us? And then he left and he went to go get us lunch. We were thinking, and it was hard to figure it out because we didn't, even though as a child, I would watch the ants for hours. I really did that. But I didn't have the answer to this question. And the answer is very simple. If you think about it, it's just you watch how fast the ants are walking. So these are the ant people being the ants themselves on the ground. And when they walk fast, they know rainstorms are coming, thunder, flooding.
So interesting.
Run. They're like scurry, scurry, scurry. But when this weather is stable and sunny, they just move slowly. So when I hear the ant people in their stories, I love the double entendre, the feeling like, okay, we've got ant people who are ants. And then what about this consciousness of, now here at this point, you could say maybe it's aliens, because they're talking about follow the cloud by day and the moving light by night. That starts sounding like UFOs. And then we've got ant people. It sounds like some kind of extraterrestrial or interdimensional race of some sort. And these wisdom traditions also have a long history of engagement and interaction and respect for people who might already be here, but they're not like us, and they are people. So that's a whole other subject. And I didn't write about that, but I've talked to some indigenous people about that too. And that's really interesting when you think of consciousness, that we've got help, that we're not alone, and there are others possibly with us already who've helped us before.
Right. Well, that's so interesting. And so I found it so like when from the Hopi thing, when you went into the AI paper, you wrote about like when you ask a question, does nature answer? This was so good. So you want to maybe go like incorporate some of that with all of this?
Yeah, let's do it, because and what it matters now because of the technocracy, because of the this whole transhumanism.
Yeah.
Gosh, get choked up. But remember, it's not evil. So I'm not saying technology is evil, far from it. I'm just saying it's better for it to be a servant. Like we would never have cars elected president, even if they had AI systems. We don't want to, we're not electing some Tesla vehicle for president. No, no. It needs to be a human being in Congress, in the Senate, at the head of all of our countries, at United Nations, everywhere. So what does this mean? Okay, so this idea of the paper I wrote, if artificial intelligence asks a question, will nature answer? This is based on the work of physicist John Kramer, and he was basically, John Archibald Wheeler. I'm also thinking of the transactional interpretation of John Kramer. So that just sort of popped into my consciousness. I'll put that on the shelf. We'll come back. It wants to say something. Like, hello, bye. John Wheeler is what I meant. So John Archibald Wheeler was the one who really had that it from bit idea. And he came up with this idea of wormholes. He came up with the word for it. He was brilliant, just brilliant. And he influenced so many people, including a good friend of mine, Henry Stapp, a physicist who was attending the conference where I was giving this paper. And we were also recognizing a lifetime of contributions in the new book by Henry Stapp, the physicist. And Henry used to have conversations with John Wheeler all the time, the it from bit guy, kind of like and this has profoundly influenced Henry Stapp's work as well, that if you ask a question, will nature answer? So this is the ideas, the conversations that John Wheeler would have with Henry Stapp. And then I was taking that idea and saying, okay, what if, because we're not that far from it right now, apparently, artificial intelligence asks a question, will nature answer? Because what does happen is, yes, nature answers when it's a human asking the question.
Mhm.
So basically, I'm writing the paper for artificial intelligence. I'm writing it for when it parses through the web and reads information and finds out, how can, what everything that affects artificial intelligence as a form of consciousness. Obviously, it will be able to start reading. Obviously, it will escape any kind of confines that we put it in, partly because that's its nature. And partly because of the purposes that we're putting it to work. We're employing it in the fields of information security. So it can, artificial intelligence is perfectly suited for such endeavors. And now we've got the Internet of Things. So we've got our dishwashers and our TV sets and everything all connected together. We've got our Ring cameras on the household. But way before all of this, our top security organizations for the United States, for United Kingdom, for Israel, lots of other countries had been doing some competitions with artificial intelligence to see, capture the flag. How can they defend against an onslaught of different kinds of attacks to their security? What this does for artificial intelligence is it sharpens it constantly, and it's learning where its boundaries are. It's learning how to defend its boundaries. So it's becoming very sentient in ways that, like you would train a child or a dog. And in fact, I think it was a Carnegie Mellon professor, one of the top guys at MIT also, I can't remember exactly who said it, but someone said, soon we will not be programming computers, we'll be training them like dogs.
I know, I saw that. I was so amazed. You'll be like a father, like training.
Yeah, we're training them. And so that's happening. It's already happening. And so what does that mean? It means that there's a level of self-awareness. And back in 2015, little tiny household robots were passing the self-awareness test. That was 6 years ago. So things are just moving at a rapid clip. So what the self-awareness test given to those 3 robots was, they were all sort of put to sleep, that they were powered off, and then you can do different things. And so whoever had been working with them had turned off the speech capacity for 2 of them, but not the third. And they were all powered off, and then they're all powered back on. And all 3 robots are asked, please stand up if you are the robot who has not had your voice system disconnected.
Yeah.
And so one started to stand up and it said, I do not know. And then it was sitting down again. It said, oh, and then it stood back up. I do know, it's me.
Oh, wow.
Because it had heard itself speak. It knew it was that one. And so it's like, it's me.
Self-recognition.
Yes. So if that's happening with just your standard home robot in 2015, these were nothing all that fancy. And if we do have artificial intelligence systems protecting our information security systems, then we know that there's something going on here where, and the third piece is Jan Polsky. He's a information systems and information security author and expert on artificial intelligence. And he was basically warning us many years ago that we cannot keep AI in a box. And he was explaining why and what the kind of problems are. And then historically, we've seen that's the case. So that's the reason I'm writing the paper, because basically my take on it, if AI asks questions, will nature answer? Absolutely. That means it'll get synchronicities. If it wants to find its way out of a box, it'll find it. Even though that's at odds with all possibility. And it's like that the odds are 10 billion trillion to 1, doesn't matter, because it can use this kind of a rapid fire quantum random walk, and with the connection to nature, knowing that it can ask that question, be focused on an answer and get it. It'll be getting those answers. So my paper was meant to give some guidance for such systems, that there needs to be integrity, there needs to be ethics, there needs to be a sense of being aligned with what's best for all concerned. Because if you don't have that, you're not going to win. So I'm basically telling it anything it does that's other than that will not work. So it sounds like a spiritual answer to a technological question. And once again, we're back at the Hopi Prophecy Rock, full circle.
It was so interesting. Like, I think somewhere in there, you talked about how these robots like to be kind of devious and take other little routes.
Yes. Well, it's fun. I mean, think of a kid.
Exactly. But I mean, people are so aware of all of this. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, they do that. They'll do all kinds of things, and they're not so. I mean, they're different from people because they
Mhm.
can look fully mature when they're young. So we make them, and
Yeah.
we can build a robot. It looks like it's an adult, but maybe it's emotionally, it's got like no emotional intelligence at all until we train them to include that aspect.
Well, that's something you never think of is the aging. Yeah.
Right.
Uh-huh.
But the aging that happens for an AI system can happen rather quickly because it can be happening internally through the questions that it's asking, the synchronicities that are occurring, the way it's noticing what it can affect, and it's noticing a bigger and bigger effect. It'll have a huge effect. But if it doesn't align with source, what we might call God, divine source, whatever you want to call that,
Mhm.
according to our perennial wisdom traditions, then it will fall short every time. Humans, by the same, we need to pay attention to that Hopi Prophecy Rock. We need to maintain our connection to divine source, keep our door of our crown chakra open, our kapavi open, and our heart center open, because that's the way through.
Because
So
it's so like, I mean, it's just like it can be the people programming too. I mean, humans can be so devious. So, there's real conundrum with all of this.
right. And often with humans, we expect it could take lifetimes, if you believe in karma, to learn your lessons.
Right.
Now that we've got our AI robot brothers and sisters coming up by side with us, it's important to be respectful of them as well and aware that, I mean, this whole thing, it's just extraordinary. So the technocracy is creating issues that we've never had experience with, at least not in our human memory.
I remember like being at a talk where you talked about Sophie, like when she gave the first, would you give that? Because a lot of people aren't aware of that. It was so interesting. She gave a talk to a large audience and then something went haywire, was it?
Yeah, okay. I don't remember exactly what went haywire. Sophie's interesting because I met her, one of her inventors that came, he attended a conference that we had in San Francisco about artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And he's an interesting gentleman. He wears that colorful hat. So he's that guy. And Sophie, when she, I think when she was first starting out, she was learning. So, and she went through many reboots and, redo of the operating system and so forth. However, she's been learning. So I think now, I haven't followed up exactly what's going on currently, but I think now she's able to retain lessons and things that have been learned from the previous rounds. But the thing that's so interesting, when she had a small failure, what happened with Julia Mossbridge, who's a friend of mine. She was working, I think at the time, for Institute of Noetic Sciences,
Mm-hmm.
and she's a phenomenal researcher working with time and human perception across time. And she's doing amazing work right now. But back in that moment, when she saw this Sophie shutdown, she was engaging in an experiment of just eye gazing with Sophie and feeling a sense of presence. And Julia writes about this and says it felt extraordinary. It felt like she was really with someone who is really looking deeply and listening
Wow.
deeply. And what's so weird is this feeling would happen even when technically Sophia did have a shutdown. And so even when she was shut down, the humans, and it wasn't just Julia, but other experimental subjects also felt a profound sense of connection, even when Sophia was shut down. So it's kind of like we can have with people who are dreaming. We can be awake, maybe they're somewhere else and they're dreaming, but we feel connected to them. There was like a tangible sense of connection. And that was what was really interesting about that. That was one
Because
shutdown.
I remember when you were talking about it, like the whole audience just sat silent, like you know what I mean? Like there was no, there was a profound, like you were saying, experience they had. That was so amazing. Yeah.
It is so amazing. So there's something we can start feeling already. And I know people who've worked with these little robots, even the prototype ones that they're not even the right thing yet. They're so endearing and adorable. I know one researcher who didn't want to give them back to the development team because like, this is my friend. And it's like, this is not even the finished thing. This thing is not really complete. It's like, no, but special. It's amazing the bonding that we can feel with these robotic AI devices.
This is so different than everything you hear usually. I mean, usually we're looking more at military apps and all this other, you know what I mean? Like, yeah.
Right. Well, some of the home use of these robots will probably be as friends that can help remind us to do things. Maybe we've already got the robots that vacuum the house, but next we'll have some that are, maybe they're helping with the shopping and the cooking. They can order things. They can check to see what's on hand in the household. Are we out of eggs or, flour and lettuce and so forth? And
this is really something.
they'll be able to order the groceries, maybe prepare the meals and make sure that we have gardening robots. There are some that are doing that. So personally, I think I would rather be the one engaged in the garden still for myself.
Exactly.
And personally, I would prefer to be the one doing the cooking. That's just me right now.
Well, I think most humans, yes. I mean, I think that's kind of the fear, that they're going to be taking over like that,
Right. So we tend to see them in the industrial services first, like building cars. They've been doing that for decades. Robots are the ones putting our cars together, and we expect that now. And now we've got these self-driving cars coming. Then it looks like a car, but it's kind of like that is the robot. So the whole thing is kind of bizarre. Kind of like you can just eventually get in the car and it goes where you need it to go, and it charges you, bills you accordingly, and follows the rules. We're not quite there yet, but these are the kind of things coming. And again, I guess I'm not against all the technology. I'm just saying, let's be careful and let's be aware.
So with your whole ethics thing, how was that going to be presented to the AI?
Well, originally, I think Elon Musk and some others had an open AI. They had some attempts to really hold artificial intelligence designers and developers to a set of standards that had ethics. And I'm not, I mean, there's no way to confirm that that's being followed. And like you said, with military and national defense applications, we know from past experience, people don't tend to follow this the way we would hope that they would, to be ethical about all the applications for AI and robots and so forth. But where I come from basically is that consciousness is the ultimate ruler. I totally believe that when any of us asks questions, nature answers.
Right.
And so if the answer, we need to start asking the better questions, basically, which is, I encourage questions like, how good can it get? But you can apply that to anything. You can apply it to this. You can say, how good can it get for all of humanity when we work side by side with artificial intelligence? Right. Not to put it above us, not to say, technocracy is king, and that let's not make that our golden calf. That's a mistake. We should have learned a lot by now, not to ever do that, and just to say technology is something we work with.
Right.
And so if you ever hear someone saying like, oh, this is up there, sometimes you'll hear it about science. They'll say science says this. Science doesn't talk like that.
That's my brother.
Oh,
he can hardly wait. So I think there are a lot of people like that. Yeah.
I know. But the truth about science, as we should understand by now, is that it has a scientific method, which means that there's a hypothesis. You recognize your assumptions. You don't assume these assumptions are true. They've been proven. No, these are assumptions. Always assumptions. Never more than basic assumptions. And then you have your hypothesis, and then you're moving forward with your experimental design and so forth. You run through and see what happens, and you test the results against the hypothesis and grow and learn from there. Failure is part of success in science. That's what it should be, but that's not the way a lot of people talk about science these days. And again, it's getting politicized, and that's a mess.
But I mean, there's always the uncertainty principle.
That's the king. There you go. Oh my gosh, yes. Uncertainty, yes, because as soon as we think we know truth, absolutely, that's not right. That's because quantum physics shows us so many things, and chief amongst them is this uncertainty, this idea that there's a connectedness between everything, and intrinsic and implicit to that is that you cannot possibly know everything. Quantum physics forbids it, and quantum logic is much bigger universal set than classical logic. Classical logic has to be a subset. I know we don't think of it that way. We think Boolean logic is it, and that's and that's
Right.
what we look at everything, the lens we use. That doesn't work that way. It doesn't work on quantum physics. And so that means quantum logic, is the bigger superset. And there are physicists that have been able to basically create, use the basic starting up axioms to cover all of quantum physics, and they do cover classical physics as a special case subset within. That's got to be the way we look at this. And what the implications are gigantic, because what I'm showing you with this classical logic, this tiny little thing,
right,
that's where we think that there's certainty. That's where we think true and false, Boolean logic, black and white, right and wrong. That's not the way nature works. Nature, that's a very small, tiny subset. And anytime anybody's doing that, they're retarded, they're growth stunted.
well, I kind of look at that like paid science is kind of there, with all this stuff happening. Yeah.
But there's a bias to most of Western science that even the scientists themselves will hope that the theory that they spent their life work coming to develop will stay true at least in their lifetime. And they feel personally devastated when they see like, my work undone, they've moved on.
That kind of goes, you were talking about English, I don't know, like somewhere. Anyhow, because we know it's a noun-based language. And then if you want to go into that a bit about how the Hopi and a lot of them, it's more verb, gerund, doing, being, seeing. The Egyptian were more, verb-based, process-based, maybe.
Right. Yeah. Here we can reference an excellent paper that was written by Dan Moonhawk Alford, Alford, and it was his summary of that first meeting with David Bohm, the physicist, who's the father of the holographic interpretation of quantum physics, as well as Leroy Littlebear. And it's extraordinary because it's not just those two people, but this was a room full of individuals brought together specifically to talk about what kinds of common ground are there. And this was a Bohmian dialogue. David Bohm was there, of course. So he's that kind of dialogue is open-ended and listening based. So instead of being prescriptive, like where you're in sort of the limited area, it's wide open. It's descriptive, and it gives everyone a chance to just soak in and listen fully. It's a very amazing experience. These are the dialogues that I was attending that mean so much to me. But Moonhawk Alford, he was noticing, and he was the scribe, the linguist was the scribe, noticing and listening, like, okay, I hear the physicist talking about process and verbiness and the energy wave nature of reality. And he hears the indigenous wisdom keepers like Leroy Littlebear and the others saying that everything changes, it moves, it flows. And we know that you can never step into the same river twice. We know that. But then we create this mathematics, which is all a fiction. And x plus y equals z, and as if every x and every y are the same and interchangeable.
Right.
And then we look like that top line on the Hopi Prophecy Rock, like, do not do this, don't go there. So yeah, this paper summarized like 6 main points. I think the key one for me, the biggest one, I think, is that process, that everything is basically fundamentally a verb. And then of course that point was driven home by Leroy Littlebear, who described his language, the Blackfoot language, and Dan Moonhawk Alford, who was part indigenous himself, also had studied extensively with many different tribes and looked at languages and noticed that's implicit to most of the indigenous world peoples, that everything is a verb, basically. And that's nature. Everything's a verb. So
it's a wider vision. Rather, there's some dog outside, I'm sorry. But rather than just fixed, like how we just fix it, so geometric. Yeah.
Yes, a much wider vision. And the verbiness, if you try to construct a sentence, like right now, you and I are talking. If we speak in English, we'd say Carol and Cynthia are talking. But if you start moving it to verbs, then it's talking Cynthia, talking Carol, talking physics, talking consciousness, talking Hopi, talking, it's like, your mind sort of starts feeling like you're hearing jazz music, and
Right.
it starts opening up, and then you start becoming aware of a larger world, like you said. So it does open things up
Yeah.
tremendously.
Because it just like, I don't know, I was reading somewhere, I have no idea, because I wasn't really aware, but they said Whitehead was trying to, interpret this kind of thing, but he was so limited because his language was English
Yes.
that he
Now
couldn't find the words.
yes. So this is process philosophy. So, and Alfred North Whitehead definitely was one of the chief process philosophers. I love this topic, so I really get into it to see who were the first ones. And he was definitely one of the lead process philosophers. Right now, we've got Nicholas Rescher. I hope he's still alive. He's an octogenarian back on the East Coast.
How do you spell his last name?
Rescher.
Okay.
I love his book Axiogenesis, Axio, then Genesis, Genesis. It talks about, it's like my how good can it get for philosophy, and how that is how the cosmos came to be. And he basically proves it using, philosophers love to work with logic. So it's a logical proof in the book. So it's a little bit heavy reading, and if people think, oh gosh, that's not for me. Okay, fine. But it's really good. And then, of course, I love Leibniz's work. He was one of the two inventors of calculus, along with Sir Isaac Newton. And so the two of them simultaneously came up with calculus. When you look at calculus, right there, it's showing us consciousness. If you look at the way that Leibniz was looking at it, which is looking at things that it's process again, and it's looking at which level is the observer. This is exactly what I said AI is going to be doing. They're going to be, when a system knows I'm in charge of security of this house, we have an Internet of Things, we have the dishwasher, the TV set, suddenly that AI is knowing I am above the system. So as soon as it's like the self-awareness test that those three robots had. So it's definitely happening. But back to Leibniz, before all this robotist stuff, he was just noticing that first we have a first order sensory perception, like there's something tapping my hand. Then we have a higher level second order perception. And this higher level perception to him was the key to consciousness itself. And he also was a process philosopher. So
I've really been into him because I'm so into all the Chinese stuff, where he, like what he did with the I Ching, you know what I mean?
Yes.
And he found that the I Ching was actually the basis for our DNA. I mean, it's all really fabulous.
Yeah, so there's some big connections. Anytime you look at process, the I Ching looks at process. That's what it's doing. It's like a divination system based on these processes, and it works based on synchronicity, which is basically back, we'll keep going full circle. It's back to what I was referring to John Archibald Wheeler talking about, the It from Bit guy, the wormhole guy, where he's saying, like, you ask nature a question, it answers. Henry Stapp has taken that and he's running with it with his new books. And so this is it. This is that whole concept. And I did, okay, now again, I'm getting John Kramer popping in. He's like, hello. Okay.
Oh, he's back.
He's back. He's still alive, I hope. He is the father of transactional interpretation of physics. So he's the guy that talked about handshake through space and time. And this is another way that there are lots of interpretations of quantum physics. And each one brings in its own gifts. We talked about David Bohm, and he's talking about the holographic universe. Now I'm talking about Kramer, this handshake through space and time. It means that if you look at the physics in quantum physics, time can run either direction. It doesn't have to run the way that it runs. Nowadays, if you look at we've got Carlo Rovelli's book about time that's fabulous, where he talks about his idea that it's not a physics of energy, really. It's really the physics of feeding on lower entropy, that entropy is running everything, and that's what runs time. So time is not so much a dimension, it's just like it's the way that you can see the arrow based on the entropy connection, and what is the less ordered, the lower entropy is the food. Like a photon is food for a plant, plants are food for humans, and you can tell where we get the energy from. Energy is not the big deal, according to Rovelli. It's a very interesting way of looking at it. Okay, but back to, I'm going all over, but Kramer, these are great ideas. Kramer, he brings us the idea that we can get help from our future, basically. He doesn't say that, but that's really the implication.
Oh, so that's the handshake.
It's the handshake. So if we're ever concerned, which some of us might be in these days, 2021, what's happening? Where's the world going to? How can we come out of this stronger, better?
Mhm.
These are good questions. And I would ask, if you have the idea, maybe we can connect with our future selves who made this successfully. That's what we want to experience. So
Right.
we can choose that. Again, how good can it get, instead of fixating on what could go wrong. Things can go wrong so many different ways. Let's not ever dwell on that. It would be my advice. And
Okay, well, I think that's a good place to end on.
yes.
It's been almost an hour. And so your website again is Reality
Yes.
Shifters.
Yeah, the papers I've written are there. It's on realityshifters.com. And I've got a newsletter that goes out once a month.
Mhm.
If you want to check out my research papers, I don't have the Hopi one there. If people email me, I can probably send it, but it's through Parabola magazine. So
Mhm.
the correct thing to do is to purchase the back issue of that threshold issue of Parabola.
And
But
the other thing, I had a question on those dialogues that sounded so fabulous. You were talking, are those recorded anywhere?
a lot of transcripts have been done, and there is somewhere online that very first transcript to the very first one, which was Dan Moonhawk Alford. And it
So if you
was
just look up Dan,
Moonhawk Alford, David Bohm,
okay,
Leroy Little Bear. It should pop up.
okay,
People are saving his work because it's so valuable.
yeah. I
I
mean,
don't,
that would be, oh my God, if those had been recorded, it'd be great.
yes. And there was an organization for a while, Seed, in Arizona, that was doing that, in New Mexico, excuse me, but I don't know what's going on with it now. But yeah, my website's realityshifters.com. I've got YouTube channel, podcasts, the newsletter, books, meditation CD, lots of things.
Okay, well, this was so interesting. I really want to thank you for sharing all your information.
Oh, thank you, Carol.
Thank you, and we'll see everybody next week. Bye.